Welcome, friends. Welcome to another episode of Illuminating Hope, where we seek to illuminate the hope in every situation. So today we have Andre LaRoe on camera from New York. I've known,
Live.
live, kind of. So I've known Andre for,
I was at least 13 or 12, so it's been at least 15.
Yeah, a long time. And one thing I can say is the Andre I know today is the Andre I knew back then. Not that he has
it makes me both happy and like slightly concerned for the less stress I put people under, but whatever.
No, you know what? Your convictions are your convictions, which I love. You know, Andre cannot be easily swayed. So he is who he is. He's grown in who he is, but man, I've enjoyed just keeping in touch this entire, decade plus. So Andre, please come on our set and and just tell everyone who you are and what you've been up to and go from there.
Hey, my name's Andre. I am a 20-year-old portrait photographer. I live in New York City. Joycy and I met when we went to church together at Church by the Glades. And then she was a youth leader for me and kind of really instrumental. Right now, since it's coronavirus time, I am shooting a lot less, but I'm working on some still lifes and some stuff I can do at home. That's a little different for me. And then also working on some strategy. I really enjoy doing creative strategy and haven't been able to do it in a while, and nothing is better than working on something that I can type versus shoot, because we shouldn't be near each other until we can all feel pretty comfortable that we're safe.
Yes. So Andre touched on what he does, but man, I'm going to send you, if you haven't clicked on his profile yet, you'll see exactly what he's been up to. It's a very humble introduction he gave himself, but thank you so much, Andre, for taking time out of your day.
If nothing else, all the things you guys taught me in church were hopefully illuminated just then. You were like, oh.
Yep, for sure. So I brought you on the show, Andre, because we've been talking about getting you on here for a variety of reasons. Really, first initially is because you're living in New York, and I wanted to see what it's been like for you living in New York. During this whole business or this whole quarantine, it was like for you. But then, obviously, there's other things that have become more pertinent to us, recent weeks. And so I wanted to just cover the topic and the issue and America's saying of racism, and just kind of start with highlighting just some real stories of what that looks like today. So I actually want to start by going a little bit backwards. Okay. So can you share, and we're going to just have a dialogue, but can you share when was the first time that you personally encountered racism?
So I want to put a disclaimer that what Joycy and I are talking about is important. But each person's experience as a person of color particularly is really different. And some of the things I'm going to talk about are really explicit, they're very obvious, not explicit as like a Naughty by Nature album, but like explicit as in really obvious forms of racism. But there are other ones that are also, I think, far more dangerous in how pervasive they are. So I'm actually going to pick one that I don't remember, but my mom brings up first and then bring up the second one. So when we first moved here from Jamaica, I was still 3 or 4, but when I first started going to school, I was going to Plantation Park Elementary, I think, over in Plantation before we moved, and I went to Maplewood. And I think the way my mom tells it, when I was in 2nd grade, my teacher, Miss Algarton, I don't know how to say that, something like that, was telling my mom that I needed to get tested for the gifted program. So my mom was like, okay, great, I can brag about other things. So she goes to, I think she goes after school to just tell them that she wanted to sign me up for the exam. And the woman was like, you sure? Your son is signed up for the gifted test? So she was like, no, the teacher must have meant you need, maybe it's ESOL or ESE test or something. And mom was like, no, My son is here to take the gift test. And so that's like not something that no one calls anybody anything, but the beginning of the expectation of what kind of student I'm supposed to be is important, because that person works in administration that then sets policy and guidelines for how they teach students. And in almost every environment, including when we went to church, I was one of few or one of the only Black people. So when you start that perception from early, it can mature into something really big. So if you remember, I don't know if you know who Deshaun Watson is. He is, Deshaun Watson. He is the quarterback for the Texans. And I think 2 years ago, he threw an interception and they lost the game. And this guy got fired that was the superintendent of Texas school system, some county, because he had put something on his Facebook like, this is why I don't love Black quarterbacks, because I feel like they can't process information fast enough. And so that is, you shouldn't take the gifted test. A very grown-up version of that is you can't deal with this information. So that isn't something that I specifically remember. The one that is the clearest one, and one that looking back on it now is really funny, not because of this situation, but like realizing how I responded to it. So if you remember, I used to go to Sawgrass, and on Wednesdays when we had church, I would walk to Dale's house, and then he would drive me. I can freely say this now. I've always lived in North Lauderdale, but my mom was a teacher, so she would get me vouchers to be zoned for different schools because she wanted me to go to better schools. But in some ways that was bad, because I wasn't going to school with anybody in my neighborhood, and I was in school with like a lot of rich white Jewish kids and no other Black people. So that has its own issues. So one being that I think it was 6th grade or 7th grade, I had a Spanish project with a woman. I don't know if I should be saying people's names.
It's Andre. Probably not.
I mean, I can totally say her name. I don't feel bad, but I don't want to like drag anybody. I had a project with a girl in my class. I was 6th or 7th grade, so I was like 11 maybe. And we had to work on a group project. And since she lived close to the school, she was like, oh, like come after school one day and we'll work on the project at my house. I'm like, all right, cool. So I think after school, I walked to her house with her, and then we started working on a project. And then her dad came home maybe, let's say we got out of school like 3 o'clock. I don't know what time this happened, but got out of school like 3 o'clock. We started working at like 3:30. He got home at maybe like 4:30. It was like some middle school nonsense. They just wanted us to practice band with each other. And so he gets home, and he like immediately comes in. Obviously it's his house. And he's like, sees me and is like, what's going on? But like, whatever. And then like a couple minutes pass and he comes out, and it's maybe 4:30, and this time is important here. And he's like, hey, Carly, you got to tell your friend bye. We're going to have dinner now. She was like, Dad, we have dinner at like 6:30. And he was like, nope, we're going to have dinner now. So
wow.
I don't know, whatever you're doing, but wrap it up. So I was like, all right, whatever. So I just left and like walked down, and then my mom was going to pick me up later. I was hanging out with one of my other friends or something. But when I was walking, I don't know, like maybe like 10 minutes passed between when that conversation happened and I was walking down the street. And I remember this because he had this big black Dodge truck. And he drove, I remember the truck because I'd seen it all the time. I never met him before, but like where their house was, you would see it on your walk. So I remember hearing it before I saw it, but he had like pulled up and was like, hey, you were I don't even know if he asked me if I was at his house, but he was like, don't talk to, like, spend time with my daughter. Just don't do that. And so I was like, oh, okay. Like, all right. Like, because I also, like, I think at that time I was just thinking, like, he must think I'm trying to be, like, smooth, you know? But our last names were next to each other, so that's why we were group partners. I had no say in it. And so this is funny because if she will know this, I think about this every once in a while. So anyway, I didn't really think anything about it. I was like, okay, sorry, dude. And I don't know if we even finished the project. And so I remember like a couple weeks later, we had an early release day or something. And so I was hanging out with my friend Victor, who also lived nearby. And Victor and I were just like hanging out. And for some reason, Carly, this person was there.
You've already done.
And her dad called her and was like, hey, where are you? We're supposed to go fishing or whatever they were supposed to do. And she was like, oh, I'm hanging out with Andre. And I was like, whoa, yeah, chill. I don't want to get in trouble. This man's terrifying. Wow. And he's a big dude too. He might be bigger than me. He might have been bigger than me then, like now, like, you know. So I was pretty afraid. And I was like, hey, like, no. And so he was like, like, you're supposed to come straight home. And she's like, well, I want to hang out with my friends. Apparently, he clearly didn't tell her that he had said this to me. And at this point, I just really thought he was like, I don't want you hanging around boys. That's just what I assumed. So she's like, all right, fine, I'll come home. You don't have to yell. And also, she had a cell phone when we were in middle school, which, looking back on it, this was like 2003 or 4. I didn't get a cell phone in 2006. So interesting. So she starts walking home, but she told him where we were. So he came there to come get her, and we happened to be outside. And I remember because her little brother was with him, and I'll never forget this because he also went to middle school with us, and I don't think I've ever spoken to either of them since. Her dad gets out of the car and is like immediately getting into it. Like, where's Carly? Whatever. Where is this person? And it's just like cursing. And I was super confused because I was like, I didn't do anything. And then he just immediately like calls both of us slurs. Victor is a Mexican dude.
Wow.
No, straight up, like a 40-year-old man is like, can I say bad stuff on this? I don't know.
It is what it is.
He was like, where the fuck is my daughter? I told you, fucking blank, nigger, whatever, to not spend time with her. I don't know how it can be clearer. And I was like, what is happening? I was so shook.
Wow.
I remember really just being like, so the thing that's weird is, in my mind I was shook, but I remember him saying, don't look at me like that. Because he's like, I guess I looked angry. But I was just so like, what is going on? And I was so confused. And like, because remember at this point, like really, like when I'm saying this, like in my gifted classes, there were no other black kids. At our school, there were some black kids, but like there wasn't a lot of us. So it was just so strange. And he was so mad. And I was so confused. And the reason why it's funny now is because I didn't tell my mom about this until like, I might have been in college when I told her. I just like mentioned it to her, and she's like, she's like, why didn't you tell me this? And I was like, I don't know. I was embarrassed, or I thought I did something wrong. And she was like, man, we would have been at that school tomorrow. And
No, I was gonna say, isn't that something that you felt that you did something wrong because of his reaction?
Yeah, I mean, it really, I mean this, it scared me. Like, I was afraid. Like, I mean, he wouldn't go kill me. I was like 11 or 12. But like, I was just like, this dude was big. He was mad. I remember looking at her little brother. She was out of the car standing behind him, like, what is going on here? And so that's really important, because I think that like, in that space, up until this point, I ended up going to Deerfield Beach High School. But up until this point, I was just in a very small group of people that weren't like Coral Springs kids in that area too. Not like Terravella kids, like Sawgrass kids, and half of them went to Douglas. And that's just a slightly different socioeconomic background. So like other little things that stand out about that time. Like I remember once I got a ride home from a kid.
Wait, describe Coral Springs for people that are at a.
Coral Springs is like, it's not bad. It's just like a pretty safe place where everyone kind of owns a reasonably sized house, except for like on Riverside Drive. So, just somehow it's either like large houses and gated communities or these townhouses, and it feels very like clearly split. So like kids might ride the bus, but you get off that bus at Eagle Trace, and the Eagle Trace kids go in there, and the other kids cross the street into like this area where everyone's just kind of on top of each other, which honestly is kind of like New York City. And so that's important because like, a lot of this stuff, people are quick to say that it is class-based, and it is, but the way that things are set up, it's very obvious that statistically it's more likely that if you see a black or brown kid in Coral Springs, that they live in a townhouse. And either that is a reflection of some flaw in people of color, or there's something else going on. There's only two options. So the reason why that matters is you start to see like little things that let you know that you're like not necessarily supposed to be there. And so like the other thing I wanted to point out about that middle school experience, I remember my 6th grade year, this kid was bullying this girl. He was a jerk. He just kind of kept calling her fat. We were at lunch, and she was tall. She's like my height now. She was tall, and he just kept messing with her, and he was little. He used to have a rolling backpack and like a pocket protector, and he just kept pushing her. She used to draw horses. She was a nice girl. But she got so mad at him, she kind of grabbed him, and when she let him go, cracked his head open on a wall at the school in front of all of us. And she got 1 day of internal suspension. And I remember when my mom found out about that, she was like, listen, I don't care how nice this girl is. I think this kid's a bully and everything. But if my son did this, I'm not even sure he'd be able to come back to the school. And so it was just little stuff like this where like I wasn't really thinking about it. And my mom was very proactive from like age 10 to be like, keep in mind where you're going, and like all the I think things that like seemed annoying then, but like to piggyback on that, another experience was doing when we used to do those car washes for Centrifuge for camp.
Yeah. So it was like raising money for
a church camp. So we did that one on I want to say that's Coral Springs Drive and Atlantic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's that Shell station. We finished washing cars that day. That was the kind of first part of the Matt Boone era. And we had
first part of the what era?
Of the Matt Boone era of youth group. So if you remember, I just could drive then, and my mom was like, I don't have to drive anymore, thank God. I feel safe that you're not being dumb. And it's like a church thing in the middle of the day. So I remember after that, I got in the car. We were still a little wet, and I was driving Eric Gamble and myself. So we just drove up Atlantic to make a U-turn and come down. And when we got in the car, I was like, I'm kind of wet. I don't want to get the car wet. So I went to change my shirt. This is like seconds after we finished. A police officer pulls both of us over, me and Eric, and it's like, hey, some people just stole like cars in this area and you fit this description. And I was like, bro, it's just stopped. And he was like, well, I saw you change your shirt, which feels, and it was so weird because at that point I was like, okay, sure, this totally makes sense. And like, but I would say I've been pulled over. I've never been pulled over in New York City. I've been pulled over the majority of my times in Coral Springs for just all sorts of things that have never meant anything. And so all these things are important because it's like, what are you doing here? Are you supposed to be here? It's like that policing of your presence, which then later makes people feel more frustrated and likely to be agitated, and then they mess around and get shot. So like, it's one of those things where it's like,
say that again. It makes people feel more agitated.
It makes people feel unwelcome, which makes them feel agitated, and then they're more likely to get shot because you get so frustrated. And you can get shot, frustrated or not, but you respond completely like submissively to something, and someone assumes that that's an issue.
Right. But I think it's so important to give context to why, because that's happened to me, honestly. I'm going to share something. I won't even go backwards yet. I'm going to go this is just a few years ago. I was in Disney, and this was like post when these mass shootings started to happen. So Disney, about 2017, and Pulse had already happened. And so they were just starting to add a little bit more security, like random checks and stuff like that. So I think this was January, they just started doing these random checks. And out of 5 park visits, this was like the 4th time that I was randomly selected. And so here's the reality. I'm randomly selected, but everyone's bag gets checked if you have a bag. That's not the issue. It's having to go through the metal detector and these extra pat downs and whatnot. 4 out of 5 visits in a short period of time, it just felt off to me. Okay. So I had my own reaction to it. I had my own visceral reaction. And I mean, as soon as it happens, I felt like enough is enough. And so I expressed my concern. I was like, do I have to do that again? And one person was kind and another person was not about it. And so I'm literally having a minor meltdown because it was just like, enough is enough. I just felt that. So I knew that was me. Okay. I knew that was just a reaction I was going to have to work through. So I sat off to the side. I was at the party of it was my friend and probably like 5 other teenagers. So I sat off to the side, and I didn't want my son to see me crying while I was genuinely contemplating, am I going to go back to the resort and hang out for the day, or continue on and let them, finish their search or whatever they're searching for. So I'm sitting there crying, and the security guard that was insistent that I have to continue through the process of being patted down or whatever they were doing at that point, does exactly what I felt in my spirit was off. I'm looking through my purse to look for tissues. I mean, I'm bawling. Look through tissues, and my friend is with me, and he looks at me, goes, "Don't look through your purse. I don't want you to pass something from your purse to her." And I was like, here we go. here we go. This is what the problem is. And so we ended up, obviously, you know, speaking to guest services, and ended up writing a letter to corporate, and identified myself as being an annual pass holder. And I said, I don't care about don't give me a fast pass or any of that nonsense. I don't care about that stuff. You need to train your people. You know, you need to retrain some competence, cultural competence, and if you're going to be doing these security checks, because people are coming in with other experiences that precede this new experience that you're adding to the happiest space on it. Mm-hmm. So
also being with other people is like instantly more degrading, because I think there's something about not having to, if it happens and you could just be quiet about it in a degree, deal with it yourself, take it in, then, you know, but when you share that experience with other people, they might want to talk to you about it. And it's like this very frustrating situation where you didn't wish something on yourself. And then not only do you seem weak to the other person, which isn't really the issue, it's like the humiliation with the other person. And it's not about like, oh, my pride is hurt. It's like, yo, this is terrible. And I would prefer not to remember this day or this time again, but now it's in 2 yearbooks, mine and X and Y and Isaac, your sons, and et cetera.
Good. That's good. Yeah. 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 And I mean, it is what it is, you know, like you said, like you're worried about mentioning people's names, but you know, whether that classmate remembers your story or not, you know, you remember your story. You know, you're trying.
Oh no, I never told her that. We sat next to each other for the rest of that year. Nope. Oh man, it's weird. It's a weird time.
It's a weird time. Okay.
Weird time.
So let's fast forward a little bit. So you said, whatever happened at the end of that incident where you got pulled over for changing your shirt,
Nothing. They just were like that. So the weirdest Coral Springs one was actually probably 4 years ago.
This one I remember too. I remember all of them.
I was leaving Robbie and Brooke's house, and I can say their names, I don't care. And they don't care. I was leaving Robbie and Brooke's house, and it was probably like 1:30 maybe? And I was driving back on University next to the walk, and like a police officer pulled me over, and he was like, do you know I pulled you over? Or no, he didn't like say why, so I asked him, and he was like, oh, like the tag is late, or I don't know what he said, and I was like, okay. And so then when he took the registration, he's like, oh, it's registered to somebody else. He's like, oh, it's my mom's car. Here's my Florida driver's license with the same address. And he was like, well, your last names are different. I was like, okay. It's all right. No, I'm not going to argue with you. So then I just had to do the whole dog and pony show for a while. But the thing that really threw me off about this one was a second guy came up and was like, hey, dude, like, if you stole the car, it's okay. You can just tell me. It'll be all right. Like, we can figure this out. And I was like, yo, what are you talking about? I remember the first thing I said was, does this work on other people? Like, what are you talking about? I don't know who you're talking to. And it was just so weird because I remember I texted my friend when it started, like, hey, I'm at this intersection and I've been here for 10 minutes. I probably was there for an hour. And then at one point he was like, all right, just like go home. And I was like, what is the point of this, man? Like, I mean, I understand like you're looking for signs or whatever, but if the sign that you gave me is not a real one, and this happens frequently, like I remember another time in high school, like just all sorts of times when I was driving, especially like going from like deeper in Coral Springs, like Wilesy, coming back was like right around that time, you would just get checked or made sure that you should be somewhere doing whatever. And it just leads to a bad precedent because I can name other people that I went to youth group with that like would speed like crazy or just do other things. And it was just starting that initial conditioning that like, not only are you not supposed to be here, but if you are here, we're going to like make sure you comply and how we want to comply, which some of these rules are important. Like we shouldn't be speeding and stuff, but like me existing isn't a question of like what is acceptable. Like you shouldn't always feel like you need to be checking me. And if you do that, then it makes me hyper vigilant of your actions and thus agitated by you.
Right. And
thus you can get so tired and like frustrated that you can just kind of break down and cry, or you could have gotten angry and yelled at someone and who knows what happened.
That's why I think it's so important to I mean, the history is so important. I think that's what gets lost and people forget the history and why brown and black people feel the way they do in America is because we pretend like things don't happen. I remember growing up in Coral Springs, probably maybe I was about 8 years old, and this is the first time that I personally encountered like, what the heck is this racist experience? And I don't know if we had to do a project or something like that. I think we just had to, I was a very shy kid, that's number one. But somehow I shared the story of how we got to Florida, or my, heritage. And so my mom was a missionary, and she was trained by missionaries in Haiti. And I was born, somewhere across her missionary work, they came to the United States, and I was born in Connecticut, which is not where many Haitian groupings are found. They're certainly not.
Listen, Caribbean people can't stop, won't stop.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Wherever we have to go at all times.
Exactly. So I remember, so this is about the 80s, and there was the Mariel boat lift and Cubans coming over to Florida. Okay, so now we're in Florida. And I remember, I guess that was part of the story, and someone said, you didn't come on a plane. Your parents didn't come on a plane. They came on a boat. And I was like, what? I don't even know. They came on a plane. And I remember just being like, what are you talking about? Like, what's the difference? And when reflecting upon that, so did your ancestors come here on the boat anyway. So what? But it was just it was the perpetuation of that's not, you came here under desperate beginnings or desperate times and things like that. I couldn't have come legally the way that we came.
No, of course not.
Of course not. Okay. So, so I want you to share, there was another story that you shared on your website, on your Instagram. And can you chat about that? That's
I wish I owned Instagram. This would be so much better. Are you kidding me?
On your Instagram.
I would at least watch you something. If I own Instagram, I'd be like, yo, you want a Maxima? Got you. So, man, it has been racism don't take no breaks. They're like, oh, we got a virus. Let's kill some black people. Everybody will be happier. Well, before we go too far, there's a couple little things I want to bring up on the shootings. There's this Chris Rock stand-up that made me feel a lot better about myself. The opening, he jokes about getting stuck on the elevator with some young white kids and how he had to get off the elevator immediately because he's like, I don't want them to shoot me. It is very fascinating to me, especially growing up in South Florida, where gun violence isn't to the degree that is perceived in other places, but the amount of times and the frequency with which we watch Channel 7, Channel 10, Channel 4, when you see that news before the evening news, the local news, I almost every day I would see black people mugshots every day. And that's particularly interesting because Florida there was that study it was a long piece done by the Tampa Bay Times about how disparate sentences are and sentencing for black and brown people are versus white people. And what that means growing up in Florida, because since Florida, especially South Florida, can be so culturally different, so quickly, you can start to play that good, bad, black people card. And so I think some of these shootings were very helpful for me to just remember. I remember I was just talking to somebody about this yesterday, and I can't believe I forgot his name right now. The gentleman in St. Paul, they shot. I can't remember. They shot him in the car with his kid.
Oh yeah.
And his wife, and they were like, "It smells like weed in here."
Corey?
And they shot him. No, not Corey.
So many.
This is probably the worst part that I'm trying to run through people's names, to figure out who said what, which is horrible. But I was just talking to a woman who grew up there because I was asking her what it was like. Philandro Castile. Castile.
Mm-hmm.
So that one was really interesting to me because even when I got to college, I'll tell people I'm not going to smoke anything or try anything. I'm mortified of being arrested and just life. And I don't want to not control my body. And I think it took a long time for me to separate out, this is something I believed because of faith and something I had out of fear. And like, just like, you know, me being like, oh, this person curses or like smokes weed. Okay, whatever. Like, I don't know. It doesn't matter. And for some reason I was like so concerned that it mattered when I was like 16 years old. And so I remember when that one happened, I remember reading, they were like, oh, well, this car smelled of weed. And I'm like, yeah, but you murdered somebody. Like, let's all just remember, this isn't like a video game, right? Like, if I die tomorrow, there are people that have to deal with my death. And obviously, no one lives forever. But the idea of like an immediate and abrupt loss of life is so crazy. And also, you remember when I was growing up, and you were in Florida also, there was the thing about the kid who murdered that girl when he was practicing wrestling moves on her.
Yes.
I don't remember his name, but I remember as a kid, my mom talking to me about what happens once you turn 10 to 11, how you can start to be tried as an adult. I need to be very careful about the things I'm doing. And obviously, that girl is dead. This is terrible. But starting to understand when someone is perceived as an adult, when someone is perceived as a threat, what that means. And so these are all things you learn very quickly. So what I was bringing back up the piece about Flanders getting killed is the concept that a fully grown Black man is already like threat level midnight, if you want to make a joke about The Office, where like a kid can, you know, manslaughter kill someone wrestling. Obviously, as he gets older, if he's in his car, then we can kill him, and that's okay. And so when you look through a lot of these, the reason why they're so concerning is the only ones that we see are the ones that are such gross missteps of civil liberty that it's obvious. So like a man in his own home, a cop comes in and shoots him because she thinks it's her house. Or Breonna Taylor, when Breonna Taylor died, they just went to the wrong house and shot her and her partner, even though he was like legally carrying a gun. And so I don't own a gun. I'm not pro any of these things. Not that own a gun is fine. Do whatever you want. I personally do not. But my point is that you start to look at these, and the common thread throughout is, I saw this person's skin and I saw they were a threat. I thought they weren't supposed to be here and I saw they were a threat. I saw that they were smoking marijuana. I saw that they were a threat. And the Ahmaud thing particularly spoke to me for a couple of reasons. First of all, logistically, like, if I'm stealing stuff, I'm not jogging. What can I steal if I'm jogging? Like, no, like, let's talk about this. If I'm going to go through all the work of breaking into somebody's house, and like, in case people think this is a game, because I had this, there was a conversation I had with somebody about this in college. This other Black dude who just always would mess with me. And I was like, just because I'm nice to you doesn't mean I don't know what it is. Like, let me be very clear. When I was, when I was probably maybe 10 or so, someone related to me, I'm gonna keep it really loose, broke into somebody's house and robbed the mess out of them. And I didn't tell anybody about it for a while. And yeah, I didn't agree that he did that. I'm not super thrilled about it. But you can't just murder people. You know what I mean? Like what is like $5,000? Is that the price to kill a person? Ooh. So with the Ahmaud stuff was really frustrating because logistically also, like, maybe they were like, he's cased in the neighborhood. Okay, sure. Let's like pretend that what they said is accurate. He's cased in the neighborhood. Okay, cool. Fine. Still though, do we shoot people for that? No. And so the Ahmaud thing really reminded me of my first year in New York. It was the fall, and we'd gone to New Jersey that day. I'd never been to New Jersey before. It was fine. But New Jersey is whatever. It's just across the river. It has a cool name though. Garden State is lit. So we cross the river. We hang out with my friend that day. We go to like some of his favorite bars. We like go to brunch. Then we watched the Florida football game that started at 3. We were playing Kentucky. Or no, it was like a midday game. I remember because I was supposed to go to my friend's birthday that night. The problem though is that game went into like quadruple overtime, and I remember this so clearly because Lily was so mad at me because I was like said I was coming, and then it just kept you know, and then I didn't even get back into the city until 12:30, and I think her thing started at like 9 or 10, and so she was like, "Don't even bother coming." So after we finished the game, my friends and I took the train back. We took the PATH train back into the city. I got on the queue in one direction, and they got on the queue in the other direction. It's funny now because they live over here now. I live much closer to them. And so I get on the queue, then I get on the 7, I get off the train, and I'm just walking. And so when I first moved, I lived in my godfather's house. He lives in Flushing, Queens is primarily a like very Asian neighborhood. It's like the largest Chinatown in New York, which is crazy because Chinatown's pretty big, but Flushing is like fully it. Like I was the tallest, darkest person, like very obviously, like normally. And so most days when I first moved, I was doing like random photo shoots or like taking photos for this rental agency. So I would get up, I would take the bus for like 15, 20 minutes, or I'd walk for like 25, 30 minutes or so. The bus was faster, but there's traffic and stuff. And I would go to the end of the train station and take it end to end. So, but at night, like at that time, there was no point in getting on the bus because it would take like so long, like to get there that I might as well leave. And it was super fun. I liked that walk. So I'd like walk and kind of sing to myself and like have a good time. And it was always fun. I'd call Robbie, like it was always something different, but it was like pretty late. So I was just getting ready to, I was like walking home. And so I was probably like 10 minutes from the house when I remember like, it was just such a weird experience because you know this, and to my, this is bad about me. I just like don't deal with like people's aggressive energy well if I'm not anticipating it. When people are like coming at me with
Who
stuff,
does?
I'm like, yo, like I'm immediately like, yo, you need to get in my face. Like I'm not the one for you. Like I just don't. And so I remember I was walking.
But fair enough, Andre. Fair enough. That's everyone.
I'm walking, and I remember literally the best part of the memories. I remember like a flash of light, like kind of coming across my face, but it was from like because it was a sidewalk, so I was in the suburbs, and there was a car just driving by really slowly with could have been a cell phone, a flashlight. I don't know what it was, but it was really bright, and it was going by pretty slow. And so I was like, okay, whatever. So I just kind of kept walking, and this guy was just kind of like, hey, like, where are you going? And I was like, I'm not answering you, dude. Like, get out of here. I don't need to answer you. And then he asked again, like, yo, where are you going? And I was like, I just was like, I'm going to ignore this person. I'm not going to stop walking because I don't want to like have this person think that I'm like interested in talking to them. Like I don't know what's going on. I don't need to find out. So then I'm just ignoring them. I keep walking. And then so they just choose to drive up on the sidewalk into a driveway and block me. So at that point, I'm like, well, I have to stop. And I'm not just going to like, so this is a weird thing because you want to make sure that people know that you're not like going to roll over for them, but you can't like raise up on people and try to fight them. And I'm not saying I'm like this person who loves to fight people, but at the same time, I'm not just going to like get wailed on by strangers. And so it was really weird because I stopped and they're like, where are you going? I was like, I'm walking home. They're like, where's home? What neighbor, like what area? What are the cross streets? And I was like, who are you? But at the same time, I was like, let me not say it. So I just said, I'm going here, whatever. And then I just started walking in. So I walked in front of the car because one thing I've always been afraid of is a car backing into me. Plus, my thought was like, we can keep seeing each other. I can go in front of the car. If you're going to do something, at least I can be aware of it. And if you choose to hit me with your car, then hit me with your car. Like if the worst case scenario is other things, if you like, whatever. So I walk in front of the car. They're still, because both of them get out. So I go around the first person in the front of the car. They're still like, where are you going? Like, what are you doing? Like reasonably aggressively. And I was like, because a minute I was like, maybe they were police officers. I don't know. But they didn't say anything. They were just like immediately asking me what I was doing, why I was there, what I was up to, where I was going, how long I'd been there, like all within like a 45-second span, just spouting. Like it wasn't even like they were waiting for me to answer. And so that was just the most like, you're not supposed to be here. And like, what ended up happening was I just didn't run and I didn't slow down. I just kind of kept walking and they drove next to me for a second and I guess like decided either he's not a threat or whatever. But like, I'll wait for that to go by. But like, there's so many other less intense ones than that. Like when I was at UF, once I got pulled over by some police officers, just driving around Gainesville, and they were like, hey, we want to check, like they didn't really say why. They said, give me your license registration. I got my wallet, and when I picked up my license, my college ID fell out, and they went, oh, never mind. I was like, wait, what? Okay, I guess I'm just gonna leave. And so it's like, but the thought of it is so sinister. It's the like, oh no, you're smart. You shouldn't. Whatever we're looking for, you don't have. And so, but as Chris Rock says, he jokes, he's like, I'm not famous from far away. I'm famous from up close. So if a police officer, someone's gonna beat me up, they can see me in person. So it's the same thought as this, where like I was just there, minding my business. And there's times when you're just constantly having to justify where you are and why you're there. And when you say this and someone's like, well, how do you know that it's about race? Often the thing is you start to extrapolate based on examples. So, for example, I want to go to another one. I went to a Jets game. My friends got us.
Wait, can I just pause for a second? Rondre, how old are you?
28.
Okay, so like I just need us to sit for a second and just realize that you could go on and on.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Okay.
But my point is that you start to extrapolate these things. So that's why we get to this point. And I was going to bring in let me give this example, and then I will go to that story I wanted to tell you earlier. I went to a Jets game. We're there, and we went with my friend got us tickets for free. We went with him, and they got us tickets to go to this tailgate. And it's like forever to get to the arena. So like I was going to eat whatever free food was there. So we get there, we're eating food at this thing. My two friends I go with are Cuban, but they're like very white passing, and they're eating food. Fine, I'm eating food. This guy comes up and he's like, "What are you doing here?"
Wait, can you backtrack and say that again? You said my friends are Cuban, but they're very...
My friends are Cuban, but they're white passing. So like, if you didn't like know they were Cuban, you would just like in passing, you just assume it's just like some random
right.
dude.
Okay.
And they're great. I love Pedro and Pablo. If you knew their names, you'd be like, well, they're Cuban. But Pedro Palomino and Pablo Palomino are gentlemen. So we were eating. This guy literally just comes up. He's not a security guard or anything. Just a dude, not minding his business. And it's like, why are you eating our food? I was like, what are you talking about, dude? What is this energy? And he's just like, no, like, yo, like, what do you, like, who said you could be here? Like, this is our food. You didn't pay for this. And I was like, Pablo's there. Pedro's over there. Not a word said to them. And I'm sitting there like, yo, my man.
Wow.
You're telling on yourself. And at the same time, I want to, like, say something to this dude, but at the same time, he's taller than me. He's with other people that are drunk as the football game or before the football game starts. And you're always in this thing where you're like, I need to make sure I modulate myself and calm down and make myself smaller so that this person doesn't think I need to fight them. And yeah, you know what? I would rather not eat this like random, like well done burger. If it means I don't have to get in an altercation, embarrass my friend, maybe we have to get, like, we can't go to the game or whatever. And it's like I'm saying, it's that constant policing of where you're supposed to be. So then when you finally turn the corner and we get to like election time, after 2016, I was in Atlanta for CNN working on a project with Kamau Bell. Do you know him? He has a CNN show, United States of America.
Oh,
it's actually one of my favorite things that I get to do. I take photos of like stills for the show. So like when you go on Netflix or Hulu and they have those photos that are there, they have set photographers for that, which is pretty cool.
Awesome.
And Kamau's super nice. When we did a Miami episode, my mom came and we hung out. It was like, Kamau's great. He let me go to his house and stuff. I love it. So actually, quick side note before that, there's one time we were in Minneapolis, same thing happened. We were waiting to start filming, and I was sitting with Dwayne, one of the producers, older black dude, he has dreads, and we're waiting for Kamau to come down, and hotel staff comes in and says, excuse me, if you aren't guests, you can't wait in here, which we were totally guests, totally just sitting there. We've been there all morning. I was like, come on, dog. Like, I just want to be here. So anyway, we're in Atlanta. One of my friends from college reaches out, sees I'm there, and is like, oh, we should get dinner. If she gets mad, whatever, she can get mad. We get dinner. She picks me up. This is important. We go to this place she recommends. We get there. We order the food. So now I did not drive, and we had already ordered the food. So I was stuck. And she's just like, this is a friend that I would go to some like Campus Crusade stuff in college with. She was like, I don't understand why all my black friends are so angry all the time. And I feel like you're like my closest one and like my closest black friend, and I just want to understand. And so on the face of it, right, the start of this question isn't really that sinister. It's like, I'm confused by something, let me
help me understand. Yeah.
But when you start to think about what leads up to this, I'm in town to shoot this thing for an HBCU. No doubt at some point recently my presence felt policed.
Okay, could you explain HBCU, because everyone knows that.
Oh, sorry. HBCU is a historically black college or university. So there are schools that back before they used to let the black people go to the regular schools. Oh, sorry, not the regular schools. The Power 5 white schools. I don't want to make them different. Back before you were allowed to do that, if you want to pursue higher education, you go to a historically black college university, Spelman, Morehouse, Howard, etc. Some really like great creators and great people have gone there. So we were doing an episode about HBCUs, some that had closed down, some that had opened. So it was like already a pretty black experience to start. And so I was very kind of in that mindset. You already kind of had flown a bunch of places, been kind of working on getting my brain in the right space. And then someone lands and is like, explain your ethos to me as to what gives you the right to be frustrated with this American experience. And now sometimes you and I have had this conversation before where I think some of the biggest and loudest noises have been people that I've gone to church with or used to go to church with, because I think that the like shroud of Jesus lets people think that we're all treated the same.
Right.
We're all children of the kingdom of heaven. That's great. But we're not in the kingdom of heaven. And very often racism isn't you calling me this thing or closing this door. It's like this is experience happened to me. It's someone I went to church with. And then when I dated them, their family was like, no.
Right. That's where we draw the line.
You're allowed on the porch, but on the house. And so all these things are just a reflection of you're not actually a person. Like, I just want you to remember that. Right. And so this one was particularly frustrating because I had to kind of go backward. And so, we were talking about why the kneeling thing was an issue, like why Kaepernick was kneeling and why his kneeling had to denigrate troops. And I was trying to explain to her, like, if you read the words of the national anthem, they're not very encouraging for people that aren't lost, to be honest. And Black people in America particularly have it tough because they were here just as long and have not had the ability to as freely access the things that supposedly make us so exceptional. And so Star Spangled Banner can be very difficult. And so something like kneeling could be interesting because a protest the goal is to draw attention to that. So then we kind of worked along all of these other issues throughout the dinner, and it was exhausting because I basically spent 2 hours explaining to her like different things that were either coded or overt racism, and how like you don't even have the ability to start to think about what the platform Donald Trump ran on or your platform is in policies. You don't even get to start to think about the policies because you are smacked in the face initially by someone who says like, hey, one of my favorite Trump quotes is a deposition from when one of his casinos went bankrupt. And he said, one of my biggest problems is that my accountant was Black. And honestly, the only people that should be counting my money are like fat, bald white guys with yarmulkes. Now, that might be like funny, but when you think about it on its face and you think about who he surrounds himself with, you start to see really just a version of the America that we already know. And so where you're not allowed to be in a space, or you have to explain yourself to be in a space, or you need to be so exceptional that you're allowed in a space. So exceptional being like, you can't take the gifted exam. What are you talking about? Allowed to be in the space like, oh, you have a college ID. Okay, never mind.
What about diction?
Diction. Oh, yeah. I mean, from forever, people are just happy that you speak well and can represent Black people well enough. And what that basically says is that other Black people don't speak well. You're exceptional to them, and thus you're allowed to be in here. Right. But if the case was sheer exceptionalism, then the people you're surrounded by wouldn't be mediocre, right? And so it's this like constant thing of like, prove that you need to be here. And if you're here, I remember I had someone that used to go to youth with me say this. He said, you should just be thankful for what you have, right? And so in that mind, that might start out as like a specific church statement, but what's encoded in that is like, we've let you be here. We've let you be this far. We pay these athletes so much, they should be quiet. But the things that determine what they get paid are market forces, which is the true religion of America, not who decides to pay what. And thus what they get paid and what they're allowed to say are no longer are correlated, because before the First Amendment, the number one piece of biblical stature and our biblical law in America is capitalism. So if I'm worth something, I can demand that. And thusly, I have the ability to demand whatever I want in the open market. And in that open market, that shouldn't affect my ability to speak. And so if you say that to people that are considered like leaders or role models, then what do you think of me and what I'm saying? And if you can't receive that information without at least thinking critically, you're not only saying to me that I need to police you, but now I need to be quiet.
Gosh, you've given a lot of context to just the history that people just may not be aware of. You know, little innuendos that people really may not even realize that they're saying. You know, something even so small as, again, identifying that someone of color is articulate. Like, try to process why you even said that. Try to process why you said that. Because, like you said, at face value, they might think they're extending a compliment, but you have to process why you're really saying that and what you're perpetuating in saying that.
Let me bring something up really fast. But coded language is everywhere. I remember, like I've said to a girl before, I was in college, and I was like, wow, you're a really safe driver. What does that mean? What does that mean? That means that for whatever reason, I thought that I would prefer to drive myself or not have a woman drive me. I don't think that that's the extent at which I was thinking about what I was saying, but all of the words are a reflection of something. And it is very worth noting, and I got in a Twitter argument about this, and I don't care, I will say it again. There is such a thing as black male privilege, and everything that black men are dealing with, black women deal with, amplified. You get paid less, statistically, according to dating apps and sites. Asian men and black women are swiped the least, so they're perceived as least attractive. And all the things like mass incarceration, policing, all the things that we deal with are then perpetuated by, like, if your son for whatever reason had to go to prison, you carry that. If he was married to someone, they have to carry that. Like, there is this further fracturing that happens. And so I do think it's also important for people to understand, like, it is really valuable to understand that everyone does have privilege in some way, shape, or form. I don't want to like throw this completely out, but recognizing that that as you go further down the system, it continues to make it worse for other people. One of my good friends from high school said this to me 2 days ago. He was like, look, it's been very frustrating to be a black person for 400 years and before that, obviously, but people have been treating women however for forever. Like, and that's a really important lesson, because I don't want someone to listen to this and then be like, all right, cool. Like, well, I'm going to pay attention to this black person. And it really just comes down to what you're willing to listen to and how you can pivot out of things.
Yeah. How are you going to evaluate? Because you're right. Everyone has prejudices. We all do. It doesn't have to be towards a certain color, a certain sex or gender, but it just could be categorically, we have prejudices. And if we're not willing to acknowledge that, then, things won't change, and we're going to continue to pass that on. Do you feel the generation beneath you is just,
as in the younger one?
The younger one, yeah.
Okay.
Do you feel like they have got it a little bit better? Like they've understood it? They kind of, not that they don't see color, because that's not a thing. You don't understand that, because we do see color exists, but that they will call things out a little bit more.
I don't know. I will say that I don't use TikTok. TikTok is the first time I was like, I'm good. I was like, I don't need this. I don't need to see this. I'm all right. And on TikTok, I know it's a big issue where creators of color are constantly like looked over. And one of the biggest ones was the girl who made that Renegade dance. And the NBA had invited like 4 white women to do the Renegade dance. And people complained the first day of All-Star Weekend. So they quickly got their stuff together and flew that girl out, who was the person who originally initiated it or originated it, for the second and third day. But it was crazy because the unbelievable amount of like money and notoriety that the girls got that those girls got the first day for something that wasn't theirs is concerning. And that's something that's super interesting. I mean, if you listen to, God, there's so many podcasts on it, but the one I was listening to recently was just about how like even yacht rock is like rooted in Black music, and the number of things that are like taken from Black people and then repurposed and are much more popular can be very, very concerning. And so I think that now with the internet, people have the ability to, you can say something and people can see it. And so there is like a larger probability and possibility that you can feel more heard, because that was one of the bigger things before, is you just didn't have the opportunity. That's why HBCUs were happening. Right. That's why Jet Magazine, like all these things were made so that like Black voices, we're just talking about Black voices, but also other things can be seen. But I think on the internet, there is a larger opportunity for that. But I still think if you look at what is most lauded and celebrated at the very top, you will see a lot of people that look the same. And a lot of people that I don't think are particularly amazing. Like if you think about even yesterday with the Lana Del Rey thing, that was very weird. I don't know if you read that. She was saying some very confusing things. But basically my point is that I think that there's better for the student, for the younger generation, in that there is a higher likelihood that someone will hear them, but being heard and action happening are two separate things, and I'm not sure that is all the way there yet, or even like to the degree. I mean, I would love to see some really specific things about hate crimes happen that would help kind of curb them a little bit. I would love to see a lot of these school shootings stop, and the ones that have happened, that the sentencing is the same for everyone involved. I would love to see that we, since I was a journalism major, I'm very wary of speaking about media. I think people often are like, the media did this, the media did that. Often the media reports and does things that are a reflection of our perception because they perform the best. And so, oh yeah, no, 100%. Like when people talk about, oh, they didn't report on this, I'm like, yeah, they probably did, but it didn't get all the clicks. So, right. As they continue to make, as the media continues to cover things, we get closer and closer to how we report the truth and not have a consistency of diminishing certain people's voices. Because Twitter is great, but you know, if you go viral in a tweet tomorrow, like the New York Times still has a larger reach than you. And so right. I think that it's really important. Basically, I'm just trying to say, like, it's better they have a voice, but there are a lot of other issues that need to happen and need to be focused on. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I just, I guess I just see from, you know, my friends' kids and whatnot, even my own son, that they are not pretending it doesn't exist. At minimum, they're not pretending it exists, which is, I could even say my generation, you know, up until recently, you know, I could say, you know, and I'm so grateful for this, that everyone that I intimately do life with is now on board. But that just happened, you know, that You're it's right. now on. Yeah. So that just happened with, you know, unfortunately egregious murder of a mod. But yes. So, you know, this show is based on, you know, kind of giving a platform for hope. Like, what can we do? What do you think needs to happen in the right now? What do you think, whether you're Black or white or brown or like, what do you think we are each responsible for to ensure that equality is accessible, equally accessible for everyone? And then, you know what?
Let me brighten my camera slightly because it's gotten a little dark. But
look at that.
Yeah, it's just, it got a little overcast. Can't be out here looking crazy.
Okay.
Oh yeah, it was just too dark. Okay, first and foremost, something that you did that was really cool was, there was a period when I was probably like 10 to 15 when people loved to say, like, whether you were like Black or blue or purple, There are no purple people. Stop.
Nope.
Don't ever say that.
Mm-hmm.
Just like try to figure out ways to curb your language that minimizes someone's experience. Is first. So that means that if someone says that you offended them, like listen the first 2 times. And don't get me wrong, there is definitely like times when you're like, all right, man, come on.
Mm-hmm.
But those are actually fewer and far between, and how we choose to use our language is super important.
Yeah.
So if we say, I'm not going to call you that, or it's really invalidating for that person and it's unnecessary, it usually doesn't cost you anything. And even if you're like, I don't fully agree with this, just humor the person and see how you feel afterward.
Right.
So that means curbing language, like whether you're black, blue, or whatever. It means when someone does say something to you, like for example, hey, America First is kind of a weird thing for me to hear because of this. Being like, okay, because go back to Chris Rock again, he said something that I learned once I started to get rich was people with the most stuff got to be quiet and listen. Because it's one thing to make me feel a certain way, but it's another thing for if like I was trying to buy a house and my other friends were trying to buy a house and the rate that we got was worse, right?
Right.
It's one thing where in Georgia, the poorest, blackest neighborhoods had the least number of polls open, right? These things are important because either there's something wrong with black people, like we're just like structurally flawed, or there is something that is continuing to cause key issues, right? So like, I remember one of my friends is a nurse and she was just talking about how frustrating it was when she moved into working in the South and was just like so many people with like hypertension and stuff. And I was like, well, a lot of this starts because when people were slaves, they would get the leftover parts of the meat, like just the terrible parts. And to make it taste good, they would like cover it in things and super fry it and stuff just to have that moment where they would like be able to eat something that they wanted. And so now things that are considered comfort foods are killing people. But culturally, it's something that people are used to. And so it's hard to shake that, right?
And look what's happened with COVID. See? Yeah. I mean, just people have to think like all of this stuff comes from someplace, you know, it's not just people choosing bad choices.
So, I mean, and you know what? And to be honest, if the first one is think about what you say, the second one is honestly, if you just don't care, just say you don't care. Like really, like, no. I just make it easier for everybody. Ronnie Jones says it all the time. He's like, if you just don't care about this, just say that and it'll save us a lot of time. Right. And that knowing that about yourself is helpful. Just be like, you know what? I don't care. And maybe you come back on it later or maybe you don't, but just save yourself some time. Be honest with people. Don't be something that's further exhausting. Number 3, I would say something that's really helpful is being really honest and open about what allowed you to get to where you are. So I think one of the issues is that for me, I didn't like you move to America, you are just like, your parents are like, work hard. And you're like, okay. And when you're in like gifted and stuff, you're just like, I'm gonna go to school and be a scientist. I don't know. But the ability to start to see what other people are doing and what career paths are, just having that extra knowledge beforehand will help you like better form where you want to go. And a lot of privilege is just the backhand deal and the handshake. It's like, it's the person getting the position they might have been qualified for, they might not have been. It's just like this transfer of money that some people never ever get to see. Right? And you know what? If I'm so exceptional that you're allowing me to be in this space, and I need to be exceptional enough that you can take time and show me what this thing is. If I need to be that, or I need to learn that, make space for that. And to go back to the I don't care point, if I'm so exceptional and you are uncomfortable with this, then we don't need to be interacting with each other. And by that, I mean, like, for example, this woman I was talking about, I went to college with, we used to go to church with our parents when they come into town. Then we started dating when I was junior. And then like the minute we started dating, it was like a little bit like, I don't know, maybe we're uncomfortable with this, to like, you should break up with this person, or like, we might take your car away or something. So, as a quick side note, don't weaponize church things for race things lazily. I remember a girl in her youth group was like, well, you should honor your mother and father. And I was like, word.
Got
Good.
it.
Good. Just so we're on the same page. So,
Yeah.
so far it's be careful of your language, be honest about if you care or not, open up doors for people. Because at the end of the day, you can call me whatever you want, but if I make the same or more money than you, I don't care. Like it doesn't have the same impact. If there's a structural issue where I can't vote as easily as you can, or can't make much money as you can, etc., then that is the larger issue. If I get sentenced for a longer sentence for the same crime, that's a larger issue, like not how I feel about what you told me. So that happens. The next thing is donating your time. Something else I want to bring up that's really dangerous is, I'm looking back on it now, the way that we used to talk about mission trips when we were in youth group was horrible. It was like very savior complexy, like we're going to go to this place, we're going to
Savior complex,
or we're going to like do something that they couldn't do themselves. When in actuality, maybe they were too busy doing other things. Like some nations that some nations that we do mission trips for are ravaged because of war that we perpetuated. Like, I hate to be those people, but these things happen for a reason. People aren't less intelligent or we're not any more special than they are. So donating your time, locally, to understand what the issues are locally that cause some of these things.
right?
So donating your time, so smart ones would be like with food banks or places that help get healthy food to people so that people can understand what food deserts happen. We're going back to the hypertension. It is doing like helpful things, like doing wellness checks, like all these little things that are swept up in class, but because we're in America, are also race has drug along with it.
Right.
And it's not by accident. Like, class exists to help capitalism work. If everybody can't be Jeff Bezos, or no one would make any money. So then that next thing is like donating your time, but removing the savior complex from it and understanding what the value is. My mom always says, if you don't know something until you can teach it to somebody else. And so if you can spend your time donating your time even more than your money, just the active hands will be helpful for you to start to peel away what your perceptions are. So like the same fear that we might feel around a homeless person we don't know is very similar to ones that people feel about Black people they don't know. And until you put yourself in a position to say like, no, I'm wrong, this is a person and I shouldn't fear them immediately, like the much more likely you are to step away from that and being able to speak positively. And why that matters is, like, for example, when Bloomberg was running and every Black person ever was like, no. When people from New York were like, hey, we had a crazy amount of stop and frisk here, and that led to like all of these people getting put in for like petty stuff, not only getting bothered, petty stuff, and then not being able to pay bail and being in jail for 3 months, 4 months, whatever, and then being in a cycle. Or that could even be how people died of coronavirus now. Like, these things start to let you start to hear stuff and you start to pay attention. You're like, oh no, that isn't right. The next thing is to really put your exceptionalism at the door. It's just like if you had a child and your child was mediocre, you would still think the world of them. It doesn't mean that because someone isn't exceptional, they don't have value. And I definitely fall into this category too, where I'll think that like, I'll work with somebody and they're kind of whatever, and I'm just not really willing to go to bat for them. What I'm trying to say is that like, you shouldn't want to be around somebody just because they're exceptional, and you shouldn't allow them to be somewhere just because they're exceptional. Like the concept of America is obviously that you're exceptional should allow you to like achieve whatever you want. But the truth of it is that a lot of us are mediocre in most things, if not everything. And that doesn't mean that we're less valuable as human beings.
It's good.
You should vote to like reform bail in your state. That's another thing. So that people shouldn't have to put up everything that they've ever owned for bail for less than important crimes. You should make sure you're voting not just at the top of your ballot, but for your county clerks, judges, and your sheriffs, specifically the sheriffs, to see how they're policing, like based on their record, and with your judges, just to see which way they're going with things. Let me see.
You have a lot. That's good.
No, I know. I'm trying. Maybe give me one give me one of yours while I continue to.
No, I think it's just important to have these conversations, you know, not just between you and I, the same color, but across the table. I remember this was so, I'll never forget it because it's still endearing to me today. You know, when the Black Lives Matter kind of just started to come to the surface and it wouldn't go away. And I remember there was someone, a friend of mine from church, and she just sat down and she said, I don't like, help me understand, just help me understand. And that was so key because we opened up a dialogue for things that she just wouldn't understand. She wouldn't. And you honestly, you wouldn't, if I'm going to sit across from someone that lives a different life than I do when their door is closed, I'm not going to understand what it's like to be them and to walk in their shoes. And so, gosh, you know, so I know conversations like that are so valuable because then she can take that and explain it to other people. And I've seen my friends that have been educated, I hate to say this time around, but it's true, this time around they've been educated and have chosen to read into things and look into things a little bit more. And they have shared with me, they've been asked by their white friends, okay, what was that you posted about? You know, just having those conversations, because then we can start to really, really make effective change. I would say it's funny because, you know, we talk about, you know, being an angry Black man or angry Black woman. I chatted with you earlier and I said, you know, people have come out of the woodwork that, you know, I might not talk to as often just because of things I've been posting recently, and just kind of checking in on me. Because I said, I told my friend last night, I think they think I'm sitting home angry just because I've been unapologetic about what I'm posting, you know, these days. And the reality is I've always thought these things. I've just spared you.
I also like don't care anymore if you are cool with it. I used to be like so worried. Now I'm like, whatever. What's gonna happen?
Yeah. Why? Yeah. Why? Why should I be quiet now? You know what I also think too? You've kind of had long enough. Like in recent times, there's been way too many examples that you have been exposed to that you should get it by now. So, you know, I don't want to say the gloves are off. You know, it sounds aggressive, but it's just like, why am I, you know, handling you with kitty gloves? I don't get handled with kitty gloves when I.
No, and you're a grown man and a grown woman. You're a grown person. Like and for me to then have to explain something to you and be your teacher. So the next one is don't assume that Black people are going to be like people are going to be your teacher. We're not saying that someone is excited to talk to you, but if you ask a question, the second question after you ask your question is, what should I read to learn from there? So if you want some quick things that are easy on Netflix, you can watch 13th. You can watch When They See Us. You can even watch actually, I'm gonna leave him out of this. Table that. I had a thought, not worth it. What'd you say?
You edited. I trust that.
It's just not worth it. I don't need that. You could read the new Jim Crow to try to understand what the concept of policing is to Black people. And you can even watch United Shades. Come out as a really good job of talking about it. Because what the whole point of this is that these prejudices turn into policy, which then affect.
Yep.
And so either you think like I, as a Black person, am more likely, or for whatever reason, like cocaine and alcohol. Well, alcohol is actually completely fine. Cocaine, marijuana, some places, and other things more than you because of some genetic reason, or everyone's using it the same, and for whatever reason, there's a much larger number of people in prison. So you have to, when you start to think about these things, and just ask the question. And I get it, when you stare over the precipice, it's exhausting. But the goal is that at some point you can loosen these prejudices so people can be at their best. I would argue that America would be better off with more people in it not being incarcerated or killed, because then they can be more workers, and the more people in the economy, the better it is. So I would say that
Mm-hmm.
it is too, it's just too much of a shame to deny someone humanity because it's like too scary or tiring for you. And so for me, the big prayer, the thing that I think about is, you know, let's say that somehow racism is solved tomorrow. I shouldn't just be like, all right, cool, like let me pack up my stuff, I'm going to go. I should start to ask myself, what is something that people are treating other people poorly about, or poorly with? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what is an identity or something that I don't understand? And just
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that maybe the best way to explain it is, maybe I don't think in my heart of hearts that I agree with this 100%, but you're asking something of me, and so I need to do a better job of being in it, because your humanity and the humanity of this group is more important than me being like, I don't know if I like understand or agree with you.
Right.
Especially when someone shows you statistics. So a statistic of like, black families as a whole have like $800 net worth, and white families have like $64,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that can be traced back to the GI Bill, largely when warriors, when soldiers came back from World War II, they could buy a home and go to school at reduced rates, and none of the black soldiers could do that. And so home buying and land ownership in America is one of the best ways to
Yep.
maintain and grow your wealth. If you don't have access to that, then you're going to be set generations back. Not to mention that obviously when slaves were released, they were just like, well, get out of here.
Right.
Bye.
Right.
And what happens when you make someone work for you and not be able to save any money, and then you kick them out into the street? Like, it's going to take a while.
Mm-hmm.
And so just recognizing that these things exist is really, really valuable. And so, like, if you look at a new scary statistic, it's like the number of trans youth that like kill themselves or die, right? So either we're like, well, whatever, or we should say like, we can't just have people just dying. So like, what does that mean? And so it's
Right.
reading, educating yourselves, not having someone act as your teacher, but like allowing yourself to learn about something, and allowing yourself to be shocked and then get past that shock to do the next thing.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that, because I think that is where I've found myself more recently. Like, you have access to the same books I do. You have access to the same Google that I do, you know, like research it. I'm like not gonna, you know, spend time layering and having you, you know, having you read my thesis, you know, do the work, do the homework, because obviously people are speaking up for a reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People aren't just making this up. And you know what? If you listen and you listen, like I said, listen twice. And if for whatever reason you're like, okay, you try.
That's fine. Yeah.
Well, I'll take twice over zero anytime.
Yeah, exactly. But listen to listen. Don't listen to prove your point.
There it is. There it is. Because if you do that, then no one is going to do anything of any value.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, from there's other big ones I'm sure that I missed. But without like threatening anyone's wallet or their sensibility, I would say, once again, read, listen, be honest if you don't care.
Yeah.
And then also, when you see, this is the most important, when you see something that isn't right, and now you have the vocabulary and the knowledge, if you don't, record it in your brain and ask somebody about it after. And if you do, talk to them about it then. One of my friends says this all the time. He's like, I know plenty of women that have dated terrible dudes, but no dudes who are terrible. How is that possible? And so either as men, we're all ignoring signs of stuff because we don't want to get like talk to our boys about how we feel,
Right.
or no, it's just not happening. And so like being able to have that conversation is tough. But I think we're better off from it, or we just like don't think women are important and whatever. And I mean, like it's just what it is. Like it's kind of that those are your options. It's like be uncomfortable and probably be wrong. And also like, sorry, this is super important. You are going to be wrong, and something I say might be wrong, especially like in this coronavirus time, we're all like policing each other about who should be where. We're all going to be wrong. But in that like same tone of like trying to be loving and being patient, if you can just go ahead and say, hey, this is something that bothered me that you said, here's what I think it means, and go from there, then you might be better off. Because sometimes it's just the question of, one of my friends said this the other day, he said sometimes the third soft voice is the one that makes someone change, not the first or the second. Yeah. So speaking your truth, and like sometimes it's not soft. Sometimes it's like, yo, man, you messing up.
And sometimes it's hearing something 7 times before you start to, adjust. Yeah.
Because the reason why this matters is maybe next time, I would love to be in a world where we can debate how big the government's budget should be, or where we should allocate our funds. That'd be great. I would love to have our politics just be like, hey, like, should we be increasing our police departments, our education department? Like, what are we valuing? Because obviously in a budget, you can't give everybody money. But if you hear people telling you repeatedly what this person's saying actually means this, and you think they're crazy, like, you have to start to ask the question, is there something I don't want to hear? Or does it make me uncomfortable for whatever reason? Because if we could, honestly, we get past this, we're better off, right? Like, when you see all those like really weird, like wake up black people hashtags, like as to like leave the Democratic Party or whatever, the first question you have to ask is like, why is it that we know statistically that everyone gets more conservative when they're older, but black people stay voting for Republicans? And I read this thing that was really interesting. Someone was like, especially like Southern black people, hence why Joe Biden really pushes that nomination, get more conservative, but will literally never vote for a Republican based on, like, I mean, we had some Jeff Sessionses in the world. And so that leads to very, very moderate Democrats. So in theory, if you're willing to expunge things that, like, say that this country is a shithole, right? And like all of what that means. So what that means is, like, when they had the wet foot, dry foot for just Cuban Americans, that should have, in theory, applied to Jamaicans, Haitians, whatever. Or you're trying to say something about like who is white passing, who's allowed to be here, and who's a political statement. Then you can then start to worry about how your coalition actually looks, because then once people are past that, instead of saying black people are low information voters, which is like literally the laziest way to say black people are dumb I've ever seen, you can then say, okay, now everyone's just going to think about what impacts them and their community the best.
Right.
And I think that is the most helpful.
Yeah, equal footing. Thank you, Andre. Oh gosh, you've given our audience a lot to think about.
I just talked your whole ear off.
No.
I know you were like, man, I shouldn't have had this boy on the show.
I know. It's so good. We've been trying to do this. We've been trying to connect and schedule this and make this happen. So I'm glad it worked out, and our universe just came together and made it happen. But any very last thoughts? We have like one more minute or two before we.
Very last thoughts. I would say that without realizing it at the time, you and Sharmona are really important for my existence, because from the minute of me meeting you guys would make sure that I knew that I was supposed to be there and I should be happy about being there, and that what I had to say and who I was super valuable. And you would continue from the beginning to hold me. I mean, I think that you guys would push me a little bit, because you were like, we need to like make sure that everybody knows that the people here are exceptional. But I think that I think that's really important. And being a mentor is really, really valuable. So like, if other people choose to mentor people and it's someone of a different race than you, then make sure you take some time independent of that person you're mentoring to just understand where they might come from. Because right now is a great example of like how racism's gotten out of hand. Coronavirus started and people went from always showing Asian Americans as our model minority to beating them up on the street. So,
Yeah, just like that.
But, I mean, there's no evidence that beating up Asian American people doesn't make coronavirus better. So who knows?
I know.
But yeah, no, I would say that there's a big value in that. And that's something that's really, really important. And I think that's something that Matt Boone did really well, was that I never felt like he was coming in like, all right, well, I'm in charge of this and whatever. I think that there was a value in like, hey, you're gonna hear a lot of different voices around you, and you need to pay attention to them and value them. And I think that you guys particularly would make sure that I knew, hey, you're supposed to be here. And that is really, really valuable, because when you know you're supposed to be somewhere, like you can call someplace home, you're comfortable enough to get past this like very annoying stuff, honestly, and just yourself, which is like an honor in itself.
Yeah. And grow and thrive. Yeah. So good. Thank you, Andre. Thank you for taking your time. I know you're busy in real life.
I'm so sorry. It's like, well, the problem is that you text me like important things, and so I'll see them. I'm like, man, all right, I gotta like And I'm like in the middle of getting like texts about all sorts of nonsense. So like little stuff. So I'm like trying to knock this out, and then I'm like, all right, like, okay, Joycy, have these really important questions about this stuff, like when I can do this, like, okay, I need to make sure I build time around this important conversation.
I get it.
And it's like, it's like hard. It's harder for me. I thought I'd have way more time right now, but like somehow it's still crazy stuff.
When you're creative, you always have things that you're thinking about and doing. So I get it. Yeah. Yeah, I get it. I'm similar in that way. All right. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you again for coming on. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your input.
Really good time.
Yeah, your rawness, which I appreciate. And thank you again, audience, for listening. Probably 3 episodes we'll cut this into of Illuminating Hope, where we seek to illuminate the hope in every situation. All right. Bye.